This is turn 50 of Degeneracy. We get Horror Struck from Umpholia, and we also get hit from Fires from Afar, so that potentially snipes a few ghosts. But these horrors themselves are much, much more threatening. They have magic power, which means that they're stronger in magic provinces, and since this is a magic 3 province, their already fairly high strength, attack, and defense are raised even further, so they're going to be fairly hard to hit. Their protection is also incredibly high, and they also have very high magic resistance with a base of 18, making them very resistant to our ghosts' weapons. So our ghosts can't really hurt these guys, and they kind of get shredded. This guy was set to cast Wind of Death. He's sort of aimed at being... he was intended to be aimed at one of Marignon's armies, so he can cause some attrition with Wind of Death casting, but that's not going to do very much to these horrors at all. And with that, you can see that the horrors won, so we not only lost our ability to use this guy to cast Wind of Death, we also lost the province and a few ghosts in the process. Here in Kishia, Atlantis has attacked me with a huge number of his sacreds, so no chance of my winning there. Here in Mometh, we run into one of Agartha's army with just some Wind of Death casting, and Iron Corpses have very low magic resistance, which means that even though they are theoretically long-lived thanks to the fact that they're undead, they can still definitely die from the decay. We kill only one of their mages and one of their sacreds, but it's still worth it to take out 22 Iron Corpses. Here in Dardania, we run into Marignon's actual army, or one of the three. This is just a small group of ghosts on our side, and these Grand Lemurs don't even have gems. They had been aimed at fighting some of Miklin's stuff, but instead they find Marignon instead. So his positioning is not that great with these elementals, given that they're kind of stuck behind his guys, so they won't be contributing very much. But between the flaming crossbows, the solar rays, and most importantly these anti-magic buffed Fiends of Darkness, he can easily just shred through my ghosts without needing those fire elementals to be in a better position. So our Grand Lemur managed to kill one of them with Hand of Death, and a couple of his other guys took a little bit of friendly fire, but for the most part, his Fiends are doing A-okay. And with that, my forces were wiped out. So we killed one of those Fiends with the Hand of Death, and he lost a couple more guys. I'm guessing actually most of these would be just a friendly fire, although the Ghostly Javelins could have done something. And the Grand Lemurs, of course, are in friendly dominions, so they came right back, but the ghosts that went with them are all gone for good. Here in Oak Halls, the AI is just doing AI things, Suicide's a commander. Here in the Sodden Merc, Atlantis is still using two large groups to take back provinces. Here in Icton, we run into Joman's army, but this is just essentially scraps that he has left over, and he has no mage support, as you can see, aside from the Pretender himself. So his banishment is still actually doing a fair amount of damage to our ghosts, and we're taking some attrition there, but our own evocation is hitting back even harder. We have a huge number of archers, and we just have a much larger front line, and we also have Rigor Mortis going, meaning that all of his guys are taking fatigue, even the ones that are not actively in combat. His Pretender did not cast Earth Power, because I guess the AI just doesn't really care about that spell, which means that it also doesn't have any reinvigoration. Having routed through his front line, there's essentially only the god itself and his archers and regular commanders remaining. Now, normally this Earth Serpent would be very tough to kill, thanks to the fact that it just has an incredible amount of protection and a fairly high HP pool, but there's a couple things working in our favor. One is the fact that it's cursed, which means it's going to draw afflictions much more easily, and the second is that it has very high fatigue, which means it's going to take more critical hits. Critical hits are going to be having the protection value of the defender, which means that the Earth Serpent is going to be able to take damage in spite of the fact that its protections should theoretically block anything that the ghosts can throw at it. It's also sitting in cold auras, which means that it's going to be getting additional fatigue in addition to its rigor mortis and base encumbrance, and now it has profuse bleeding, which means it's going to lose yet more fatigue every round, keeping it exhausted. And between fatigue, paralysis, and total exhaustion, it is losing HP very quickly. It's getting a ton of afflictions, meaning that even if it does get called back, it's going to be easier to take down in the future. And now it is paralyzed as well, which this means it's going to be stuck here for a very long time, given that sky-high paralyzed score. And between bleeding, crits, and crossbows, we managed to get rid of our first pretender of the game, killing this Earth Serpent and a whole bunch of this chaff, losing a few of our own ghosts in the process, to mostly to the banishment from the priests that he brought with him. Here in the Great Dunes, this is another one of Marignon's armies, this time just hitting a handful of ghosts that had been left in the province. Here in Onphalia, we capture a province from Atlantis with our little group of raiders there. And the same is true of Stone Heavens, except we meet a couple of these terrible Atlantean infantries and get rid of them easily with our ghosts, even though we have a roughly equal number of them. Here in Warshin, we managed to capture the Indie Throne thanks to our geared up Lich Queen Pretender, lasting long enough under Wailing Wind to get rid of the enemy. Here in Relothia, Marignon raids us with a small force of demons led by a Gotic captain. In Sailor's Haven, we run into a couple of Mictlanese Sacreds, and we kill them with a reasonable-sized number of ghosts. And finally, in Toledo, we managed to capture the fortress, which had a few mages inside of it, as well as a handful of Sacreds, but we had just a huge number of ghosts, which don't mind walls particularly much. In Ungbeloth, we get hit by a blizzard, which is potentially from a spell, or potentially not. I mean, our provinces are generally cold regardless. We get some free province defense in the High Ocean, we get some free money in Warshin, and we get a bunch of nature gems out of Valador, so that's great. In Apriskia, we are continuing to siege down this fort. And then we're going to send this ghost squad over here in order to try to hit this fort, just in case Atlantis doesn't patrol, while these guys are going to be continue raiding in this direction. We've essentially, by storming that fortress, consolidated our position here in this portion of Mictlan, but we're going to be building a temple here regardless to help spread our dominion further and get free spawn out of this fort, while the rest of our troops are going to go over here to help cover this fort and eventually storm that as well. We're going to continue trying to raid into the sea over here, and we can see that Marignon is definitely interested in conquering this Mictlanese territory. So we're going to be recapturing this Indie province, or neutral province rather, which had been hit by horrors with just a few guys, and then we're going to be trying to continue to cause attrition to Marignon's guys with Wind of Death casting. We're going to raid into Agartha from over at this side, given that he's managed to hold on to this little two-province choke point fairly well. And we're going to continue marching onto Joman now that we've actually killed their pretender. We can try to storm this castle and then go for their capital as well. Having taken this throne, we're going to be sending troops out mostly in order to basically secure our territory from Mictlan. So these guys are going to basically just be reinforcing this fort with a bunch of chaff so that Mictlan's army here can't storm it quite as quickly, while sending more actual combat ghosts onto this fort over here so that they can storm that more quickly and then move back up, given that these provinces are neighboring, to kick off Mictlan if he goes in this direction. And that's the turn. This is turn 51 of Degeneracy. We get hit by another horror attack, but this time it's where our pretender is, and she's capable of holding them off quite well. She finds a few magic sites in Tiradir. Mictlan does attack one of our provinces as expected. This is not, however, the fort which we had been reinforcing. In the Mercs, we just siege this fort and beat up the guys that the AI had set to patrol with no losses whatsoever. In Kunaral, it looks like Atlantis did actually protect this province, so he's got 16 of these magic weapon, high protection guys who have no trouble killing ghosts. In Stone Heavens, a bunch of ice guards led by one of these leader mage guys take the province, and then the same is true in Anfalia. In Anidria, Marignon's continuing to push into the former Mictlan territory. In Foss-Dir, we kick out this woodhead druid who had potentially been site-searching. In Spires of Ascension, we once again run into Atlantis' defenders. In this case, they're actually patrolling the fort. In Shiny Ocean, we managed to take a water province off of Atlantis. In Ampholia, we kill just some Great Hawks, which were summoned by Marignon so that he would have essentially magic phase control over that province which he had cleared with horrors. In Nalbil, we actually defeat Mictlan's attacking force, in no small part thanks to the fact that he didn't bring a priest with, so these Jaguar warriors were never buffed. In Renthale, this is once again Marignon pushing through to the area which I had conquered from Mictlan, using these heavy crossbowmen, which he must have gotten from an event, which are excellent high protection troops. And then he does, however, lose 3 of his fiends to friendly fire. In the Great Dunes, we finally actually get off a good Wind of Death cast. So this is actually what we had been trying to do for some time, and we finally managed to catch one of Marignon's armies. So his demons have no trouble actually clearing up our troops, but we did get him to burn all these gems, and as you can see from all these purple troops, a bunch of his units were decayed. And in the cleanup phase at the end of the battle, many of his guys die. So we kill one of his mages, one of his commanders, and just a random assortment of troops that failed their magic resistance checks. Thanks to the fact that these guys have much higher magic resistance, we don't kill very many of the actual demons, but we still cause substantial damage while taking very negligible losses, and he even spent more gems than we did, thanks to all those fire elementals that he was summoning. And we take over Alluvio, one of those water provinces. In Ikden, Joman's army actually walks right past ours, and actually manages to take this province with just a bunch of chaff. But since it is just a bunch of chaff with no made support, we should have no trouble recapturing it. In Bourbon Heights, this is another province which we're capturing from Agartha, and this one is just the guys that had been summoned by the units stuck in that province. So we lose a bunch of these dispossessed spirits, but we have lots of these Fear Aura apparitions. And in Abyssia, Atlantis tries to storm Abyssia's capital and does not come out ahead. I think that he just wasn't expecting this province to actually be defended, but it has their N9E9 god with a little bit of gear. The AI seems to gear things pretty randomly, but at least it does have this Ring of Fire, so it doesn't get lit on fire by friendly units. And then, yeah, he has just this random assortment of mages, which I don't think have any gems, but can still cast some spells, while his own troops are just arranged in a random blob here. Oh, and these are the really bad Atlantean infantries for the most part, instead of the mostly awesome Ice Warriors, although admittedly they're much less awesome in the high heat from Abyssia's capital. I guess he must have had at least one gem, or one mage with gems, rather. Although given that this is a size 3 fire elemental, it looks like it's only a lesser one. Thanks to the fact that these troops are so bad, they get stuck in this little choke point in front of the god and the small, extremely tiny number of sacreds and the fire elemental, while they have the wall javelins firing upon them and the evocations from the unscripted mages. Given that this is Heat 3, many of these units are lit on fire as well, so they're going to be burning to death even if the direct damage wasn't already killing them. And with that, Atlantis' terrible army is lightened somewhat, and he even loses one of the mages in the process. He might come back with actually better troops, and possibly even some mage support, but until he does, he's going to have some trouble there. In Ampholia, we can feel very glad that we captured this one back, because we got some nice some nice gold. In Lemuria, we get some earth gems, and we finish our fortress here finally, so we can get yet more free spawn undead in the area around Jomin. We're going to be recapturing this province with the Shadow Tribune who had been bringing up these Winter Wolves. He's wearing a Crown of Command to give him magic command. And since these guys are mindless, the fact that we're a little bit over on squads isn't a huge deal. And he has Inspirational anyways, so he can even add morale to these guys. Or rather not have a morale penalty for those guys even though he has too many squads. We're still recruiting these excellent mages, and we are sieging down this fortress with... once again, our forces are split between the sieging guys who are carrying the troops and the commanders who are just calling shadows so we can get additional chaff. Because we're now moving into enemy dominion or would be moving into enemy dominion in this guy right over here, and we do like our hero and want to keep him alive, he's going to be just calling additional apparitions instead of continuing with the assault. Given that our Wind of Death casters were both killed, they respawned in our capital, so we're going to be sending them forward here to move and patrol. So if Marignon does attack this thing, then he's going to be walking face first into some Wind of Death casting. And if he doesn't attack it, then the Wind of Death casters are going to remain in that province, so they can go continue and harass him again. Mictlin, meanwhile, being AI's been reduced to just a handful of provinces over here. Marignon is taking advantage of that to try to capture them, to prevent them all from falling into my hands. But this is going to be something which I can then try to use as like a negotiating point, that like, hey, you know, you can have these provinces over here, instead of taking my worthless provinces over here. But so far, Marignon has been continuing to attack me, rather than be willing to work with me. I'm going to be attacking up into here, which is also another versatile place to attack from. Given that I can expect this province to be covered by these guys right over here, it's pretty obvious that, like, given that I'd typically been moving, like, across sea provinces, he might want to, like, try to stop me there. But yeah, once I'm in here, I have like a bunch of different provinces that I can move to, either further inland, potentially even hitting Agartha's lone province right over here. Although that's lower value and also disconnected from Agartha's territory, so that would like be causing the least amount of economic damage, as opposed to taking more sea provinces. But I will at least have the option, and it's unlikely to actually be actively defended. And yeah, so Marignon is essentially picking up a lot of the slack in terms of actually fighting me. He's mobilized all of his forces to fight me, and has been for quite some time. And while we were able to cause some attrition to him just now with our Wind of Death casters, his army still remains very strong and scary. Although he does have some issues with resupplying gems, given that these provinces up here don't have labs, so he needs to get gems through this this area right over here. But he can still definitely do that and can still cause damage to me, so I'm basically just going to try to make things as difficult for him as possible by continuing to try to spam out that battlefield clear. And that's the turn.